Imagine you go out and you buy an absolute top-of-the-line digital camera.
Yeah.
Like we're talking 8K resolution, right?
Oh, yeah, the massive lenses, the biggest image sensor you can get on the consumer market.
Exactly. Limitless memory capacity, the whole 9 yards.
Mm.
And you hike out to this gorgeous sweeping landscape, maybe, I don't know, the Grand Canyon at sunrise.
Sounds perfect.
Right. So you point the lens at the horizon, you dial everything up to the absolute maximum setting, and you just hit the shutter. You are pulling in every single photon of light bouncing off that canyon.
Which sounds like you'd get the perfect picture.
You'd think. But when you actually look at the digital screen to see this masterpiece,
Yeah.
the image is just a blinding, solid, white rectangle.
Yeah, it's completely blown out. I mean, you let in absolutely every piece of available data, and the result is just a total lack of detail.
Right.
Because you've captured everything, which means essentially you can see absolutely nothing.
Exactly. The sensor is just drowning. And honestly, that blinding white rectangle is, well, it's the most accurate visual representation I can think of for what it feels like to live and operate in the modern information age.
Oh, 100%. It's exhausting.
It really is. I mean, we have the collective knowledge of the entire human species just sitting right there in our pockets, right?
Yeah.
We have unprecedented access to data, to experts,
I know.
to AI that can summarize quantum physics for you in 10 seconds.
Yeah, and yet, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, we are drowning in that light. We are arguably more confused, more anxious, and honestly more fundamentally disoriented than ever before.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is so critical for you, the listener. We're cracking open this fascinating, highly structured document titled A Clear Mind.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece of work.
It really is. It's essentially a blueprint that attempts to decode what is arguably the rarest, most elusive mental trait in the modern world, which is clarity. We're going to dismantle why having the internet hasn't, instantly turned us into modern-day Leonardo da Vinci's. We're going to talk about how to actually build a subtractive filter for your brain.
And later on, we're even going to look at this radical system for managing the noise that sounds, honestly, like something straight out of a sci-fi novel.
Oh, the distributed cognition thing. Yeah, it sounds wild, but it's actually rooted in deep cognitive psychology. It's fascinating.
It really is. And what's truly compelling about this text right from the start is that it completely strips away the mystical aura around clarity.
Yeah, it's not spiritual.
Exactly. It doesn't treat it as this vague, enlightened state you achieve by just meditating on a mountain for a decade. It treats it as a mechanical, structural process.
It's a system you build.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you look at our standard list of positive mental traits, things like intelligence or wisdom or charisma clarity often just gets lumped in with them. Right?
Yeah. People use those words totally interchangeably. And I want to push on that right away because the document redefines our entire vocabulary here. It draws incredibly sharp distinctions.
It really does. Like, let's look at intelligence first. We tend to think, oh, that person is so smart, they must be a clear thinker. But that's absolutely not true, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, think of intelligence as your brain's raw processing power. It's just your capacity to hold and manipulate complex variables.
Right. It's the engine.
Yeah. But you can have an incredibly powerful processor and still run totally tangled, bloated software. I mean, we've all encountered brilliant people, maybe an elite software engineer or a groundbreaking physicist who literally cannot explain their own ideas to anyone outside their field.
Oh, totally. Their minds are moving so fast, pulling in so many variables that their output is just a chaotic mess. Intelligence is the capacity to handle complexity. It doesn't automatically mean you can distill it.
And then you have knowledge, which is just the stored data. It's the fuel. But as we established with that camera metaphor, more data often just creates more noise.
Yeah. And then there's wisdom, which the text defines as knowing what actually matters. It's having the right moral or practical compass. It's the navigation system.
Right. But again, you can be incredibly wise, have this deep life experience, and still be completely unable to articulate that wisdom to a younger generation.
Exactly. And then you have the most dangerous imposter of all, which is charisma.
Oh, man. Charisma is tricky.
It is. Because charisma is just the presentation layer. It's the ability to deliver ideas in a way that makes people feel something. But charisma can completely mask a total lack of clarity.
Oh, absolutely. You can listen to a highly charismatic speaker for an hour, feel incredibly fired up, and then when someone asks you what they actually propose, you realize you have absolutely no idea.
Right. The substance just wasn't there.
Okay, so if intelligence is the processing power, Knowledge is the database, wisdom is the compass, and charisma is the presentation. What exactly is clarity?
So the text defines clarity as visibility. But the vital distinction here, really the core thesis of the entire document, is that almost all those other traits are additive.
Right. Additive.
Yeah, like if you want more knowledge, you add books to your library. If you want more influence, you add charisma. But clarity is completely subtractive. It is the active, ruthless process of removing confusion and compressing complexity.
Okay, let's unpack this because this shifts the paradigm completely. It makes me think of a sculptor staring at a massive block of raw marble,
Right,
right?
it's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, because you don't create the statue by adding more marble.
Yeah.
You create the statue by chiseling away every single piece of stone that isn't the statue.
Yeah.
You are subtracting material to reveal the form that was already buried inside.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why someone with less raw intelligence or maybe a smaller database of knowledge can often operate with infinitely more clarity than a world-renowned expert.
Because the expert just has too much marble.
Exactly. The expert has added too much marble to their mental model. They are obsessed with the nuances of every single chip of stone. But the clear thinker has chiseled away everything that isn't load-bearing.
But wait, let me challenge that for a second. If clarity is just subtractive, right, if it's just about removing inputs, why can't I just delete my social media apps, cancel my internet service, go live in a cabin in the woods, and instantly become a master of clarity?
Because ignorance isn't the same as clarity.
Right.
And that is a phenomenal distinction. The text addresses this by breaking down the actual layers of subtraction. It's not just about blinding yourself to the world. The subtraction has to happen at 3 specific stages of how we process reality.
Okay, let's walk through those layers because this is how information actually gets metabolized by the brain. It's perceptual, cognitive, and expressive.
Exactly. So if you just go live in a cabin, you are artificially limiting your perception, but you aren't actually improving your cognitive machinery at all.
So what does subtractive filtering look like at that first layer, the perceptual layer?
Well, perceptual clarity is about what you allow yourself to see in the first place. It's your frontline defense. When an event happens in the world, can you look at it and separate the raw signal from the noise?
Right.
And more importantly, can you subtract your own biases and your own emotional projections from what you're seeing? This is where most of us fail immediately.
Oh, for sure. We look at an event, and before our brain even fully registers the basic facts, we've already layered our political anxiety, our personal insecurities, our tribal allegiances over it. We've basically just added mud to the lens.
Exactly. We see what we want to see or what we're afraid to see. So assuming you can actually get past that and see the raw signal, you move to the second layer, cognitive clarity.
Okay, so how do you organize what you've seen?
Right, this is the structural layer. You've perceived the data accurately. Now, how do you map it out? Cognitive clarity is the ability to look at a tangled web of cause and effect and subtract all the irrelevant variables.
It's figuring out the core mechanism.
Yes. Like, if a business is failing, cognitive clarity isn't just listing the 40 things going wrong. It's identifying the single structural bottleneck that is actually causing the other 39 problems.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then finally, you have expressive clarity. So once you've seen reality accurately and you've structured it internally, can you translate it?
Right. This is where you subtract the jargon, the ego, the unnecessary abstraction. You strip it down so you can hand the idea to someone else in a way they can instantly use.
And here is where the document makes a really provocative point. Because we assume that if someone is speaking with incredible expressive clarity, like if their argument is beautifully structured and perfectly easy to understand, we just assume they must be telling the truth.
We do. But the text warns us that clarity is frequently mistaken for truth. And they are entirely different things.
I had to stop and reread that section a few times. I realized I have spent my entire life confusing those two things. We just assume a clear argument is a correct argument, but you can be incredibly clear and completely disastrously wrong.
Think about a highly skilled con artist, right? Or a charismatic cult leader, or even just a very confident, ideologically driven pundit on television. They often present an incredibly clear, highly structured worldview.
Yeah, the cause and effect seem perfectly logical when they explain it.
Exactly. The problem is their foundational premise, the very first block of marble, is completely false. They have cognitive and expressive clarity, but they completely bypassed perceptual clarity. They ignored reality to build a crystal clear fantasy.
Wow. And conversely, you can be totally unclear, but holding on to a profound truth. Think of like the awkward scientist who has discovered a major breakthrough but stammers through the presentation and uses completely impenetrable jargon.
Right, the truth is there, but the expressive clarity is zero. The ultimate goal is to align all three layers.
Precisely. So now that we know what clarity actually is, the subtractive three-layered filter, we have to confront the environment we're trying to use it in. Like, why is it so incredibly hard to find right now?
To get to the bottom of that, the text introduces this fundamental tension in the modern era between two different types of minds, the specialist and the generalist.
Right. And we all know the specialist. This is the person who spends their entire life looking through a microscope at one specific discipline. They offer incredible depth and precision, but the massive risk there is tunnel vision, right?
Yeah, they miss the forest for the trees. And then you have the generalist. This is the person who bounces from topic to topic, reading widely, exploring all these different fields. They offer incredible adaptability and breadth.
But the risk is shallow understanding.
Exactly. They know the vocabulary of a dozen fields, but they don't understand the underlying mechanics of any of them.
But the text argues that neither the pure specialist nor the pure generalist can really survive the modern information environment with their clarity intact. What the world actually demands now is a third archetype.
The synthesizer.
Yes, the synthesizer.
The synthesizer is essentially the holy grail. It's someone who possesses the expansive range of a generalist, but has somehow developed the cognitive machinery to compress that broad information into the actionable depth of a specialist.
Right. They don't just collect dots. They draw the structural lines between the dots.
Beautifully said. But if synthesizing is the ideal, why are so few people actually doing it? I mean, we have all the tools.
We do. We assume, intuitively, that because I have access to 20 different perspectives on global economics right on my phone, I should be able to synthesize them easily. But the text points out 3 specific reasons why the sheer volume of information today actually shatters our human intuition.
And the first reason fundamentally changes how we interact with knowledge. Because historically, information was always filtered by default.
What do you mean by default?
Well, for the vast majority of human history, if a piece of information reached you, whether it was a book, a newspaper article, a scientific paper, it had already passed through rigorous gatekeepers.
Oh, I see. Editors, publishers, peer review boards.
Yeah. Exactly. Even tribal elders. You might not agree with their biases, obviously, but someone else had already done the heavy lifting of perceptual and cognitive filtering. They chiseled away the most obvious noise before handing you the marble.
But today, that filter is entirely gone. The internet delivers everything to your brain simultaneously. You log online, and a brilliantly researched thesis on climate policy, a totally fabricated conspiracy theory, an optimized marketing campaign, and a video of a cat falling off a table all arrive on your screen at the exact same moment.
With the exact same visual weight.
Yes. The burden of filtering has shifted completely from the institution to the individual.
Which leads right into the second reason. This volume completely overwhelms our evolutionary capacity. I mean, think about the environment the human brain evolved in over hundreds of thousands of years.
Small tribes.
Yeah, we evolved to handle the limited, immediate inputs of a small tribe. We process the weather, the tracks of animals, the social mood of maybe 50 people. Our brains are beautifully optimized for that.
We literally do not possess the biological hardware to process the entire global consciousness in real time.
We don't. We are not built to evaluate conflicting opinions from 50 different credentialed experts on a novel virus or a geopolitical conflict before breakfast. It just short-circuits our ability to feel what is true.
Man, I feel that in my bones. I mean, think about the last time you, the listener, spent 45 minutes scrolling through a heated debate in a comment section. You processed thousands of words, multiple viewpoints, endless links to evidence.
And at the end of those 45 minutes, did your mental model of the world get clear? Did you feel a profound sense of clarity?
Definitely not. My blood pressure just spiked while my brain fog thickened.
Right. And that is the perfect example of the third and most insidious reason volume breaks our intuition. Engagement does not equal value.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
The systems that deliver information to us, social media algorithms, news aggregator feeds, recommendation engines, they are not neutral utility pipes. They are highly optimized behavioral engines.
And what do they reward? They reward novelty. They reward high emotion, particularly outrage, fear, and tribal validation. They reward extreme speed.
But they absolutely do not reward accuracy. They do not reward nuance or careful integration of facts. So the information that actually survives the algorithmic gauntlet to reach your screen is often the information that is fundamentally hostile to clarity.
So if the systems are rigged for speed and outrage, what are the cultural and psychological roadblocks preventing people from synthesizing all this? Because it's not just the algorithms, right?
No, it's not. We have deep psychological roadblocks. For one, synthesis is energetically expensive. It is exhausting. To synthesize well, you have to hold multiple, often contradictory ideas in your head at the same time without panicking.
You have to endure the cognitive dissonance of reconciling opposing truths. And most people are simply too burnt out from the baseline demands of daily life to engage in heavy cognitive lifting in their free time.
Yeah. And then there's a massive ego barrier. Because to be a true synthesizer, you have to constantly update your mental models, which means you have to constantly admit that your previous understanding was partial or flawed.
And psychologically, humans hate doing that. We vastly prefer the rigid comfort of certainty over the fluid discomfort of updating our worldview. We just want to pick a team, adopt their talking points, and stop thinking.
Exactly. Not to mention, synthesis is a skill, and it's not one we are taught. Our entire education system is built on an industrial model designed to produce specialists.
Right. We're taught to memorize facts within siloed subjects. We learn biology at 9 a.m. and history at 10 a.m. But we are almost never taught how the biological pressures of disease shape the historical movements of empires. We are taught to collect dots, not connect them.
So knowing all these headwinds, the algorithms, or biology, the lack of training, how does the rare individual actually pull this off? How do you mechanically build a clear mind?
Well, the source material provides a deeply practical framework for this. It takes the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, which says 80% of results come from 20% of causes, and it applies it ruthlessly to information consumption.
But it frames it around a very specific question, right?
Yes, a clear mind doesn't just ask, is this interesting? It asks, does this information actually change my decisions, my mental models, or my behavior?
That is the ultimate subtractive filter, because usefulness isn't about volume, it's about impact. If you read a 500-page book filled with fascinating trivia, but none of it alters how you navigate reality, it hasn't added to your clarity, it's just added more marble to the block.
Exactly, and the text visualizes the actual mechanism of synthesis as this four-stage funnel. And I want to dig into how this actually works in practice, because this isn't just a passive list, it's an engine.
Okay, let's break down the funnel.
The starting point is exposure. You have to consume broadly across different domains. If you only read economics, you will try to solve every problem in life, like an economist. You need range.
But range is useless unless you immediately apply the second stage, which is filtering. This is where you aggressively ask that Pareto question. You read widely, but you discard the trivia. You are hunting for the load-bearing concepts.
The underlying principles that actually drive the system you're looking at.
Exactly. And this leads to the critical pivot, the stage where most people completely fail. Structuring. You've been exposed, you've filtered the core concepts. Now what? You have to turn those insights into a model.
And how do you actually do that?
Structuring means you stop looking at the information as isolated facts and start looking at the relationships between them. Like, if you read a book on the fall of the Roman Empire and a book on the collapse of modern corporate startups.
Two totally different things.
Right. But structuring means you extract the shared principle, say overexpansion, without decentralized communication, and you name it. You create a mental framework out of it.
And once you have that structure, you reach the final stage. Application. You take that new mental model and you use it to make a decision in your own life. You use it to predict an outcome. If the model fails, you go back and refine it. It's an active, living process.
But zooming out from the individual for a second, the text makes a really profound observation about the limits of this process today. Because we asked earlier why there is no modern-day Leonardo da Vinci or Aristotle.
Why isn't there one singular, universally recognized, clearest mind on the planet right now?
Right, and the text asserts that the era of the singular genius is permanently over.
Because the sheer volume of human knowledge has fragmented way beyond the capacity of any single biological brain. I mean, think about science. In Aristotle's time, you could reasonably grasp the edges of known physics, biology, and philosophy all by yourself.
But today, biology alone is fractured into thousands of hyperspecific subdisciplines. It takes a decade just to reach the frontier of understanding how one specific protein folds. No human being can hold the whole picture anymore.
Which leads to a fascinating paradigm shift. Clarity today is no longer centralized. It is distributed. The clearest mind is not a person anymore. It is a network.
Yes, it is a shifting web of specialized researchers, cross-domain writers, systems engineers, and increasingly, AI tools that can process massive data sets.
So the role of the individual changes completely. You are no longer trying to be the container of all knowledge. You are trying to be a highly effective node that can navigate that network. You are the curator.
And that requires a massive, almost uncomfortable level of humility. You have to operate with the constant, explicit awareness that your view is always partial.
Right. If clarity is this active, ongoing process of navigating a distributed network, can someone ever permanently achieve a clear mind?
The document explicitly says no. It completely destroys the myth that clarity is a permanent destination. You don't just achieve clarity and retire to a mountaintop. It's not a trait you permanently lock in.
The text maps this out really well. It asks, is clarity a state, a trait, or a process? And the answer is that it's a process you maintain to reliably revisit a state of clarity.
Because even the most brilliant, disciplined thinkers get tired, they get hungry, they get emotionally triggered by a family argument. When that happens, their clarity vanishes. It's a state, not a permanent trait.
So to understand how you build that reliable process, the text outlines a progression, like a ladder, of how clarity develops in an individual. There are 5 levels.
Yeah, let's walk through the ladder.
The baseline, level 1, where most people operate on a good day, is simply noise reduction. This is when you can quiet the immediate mental chatter enough to focus on a single task without reacting to every impulse.
Basically just getting off the reactive treadmill. But when you actively work on your cognitive filtering, you move into level 2, structured thinking. This is where people start noticing your clarity.
You aren't just reacting. You can organize your thoughts logically. If someone asks your opinion, you don't just dump a stream of consciousness on them. You give them a premise, supporting evidence, and a conclusion.
Exactly. Then the breakthrough happens when you reach level 3, cross-domain awareness. This is where your broad exposure pays off. You stop seeing disciplines in silos.
Oh, this is the pattern recognition part.
Yes. You recognize that the mechanics of an immune system fighting a virus in biology look remarkably similar to the mechanics of an algorithm fighting spam on a social network. You start seeing the underlying shapes of reality.
Which naturally feeds into level 4. Synthesis. You aren't just noticing the patterns anymore. You are actively combining them into new, unified frameworks that you can use to solve novel problems.
You can simplify massive complexity for other people without stripping away the truth of the situation.
And at the very pinnacle of this progression is level 5, adaptive clarity. And the text notes this is incredibly rare. Adaptive clarity is the ability to continuously update your foundational beliefs without experiencing an existential crisis.
It's the capacity to handle intense ambiguity. An adaptive thinker knows exactly where the edges of their understanding are, and they are perfectly comfortable saying, I don't know, but here's how I would go about finding out.
But the text issues a massive warning here for anyone trying to climb this ladder. There is a trap that is incredibly easy to fall into, especially for smart, curious people. And that trap is mistaking breadth for clarity.
Oh, curse of the trivia machine.
Exactly. You can know a little bit about a massive array of topics. You read all the popular science books, you listen to all the optimization deep dives, all the buzzwords, but your understanding is a mile wide and an inch deep.
Right, you lack the structural foundation to actually apply any of it. You sound smart at a dinner party, but you can't build a functional system.
So how does the level 5 thinker avoid that trap? The text introduces this concept of conceptual fluency. And I want to spend a minute here because this is the absolute unlock. The clear thinker is not trying to memorize the specific data points of every field. They are hunting for the patterns.
Let's use a very specific example to ground this. Think about the concept of a negative feedback loop. Now, in biology, a negative feedback loop is how your body regulates temperature, right? You get too hot, you sweat, the evaporation cools you down, the sweating stops, the system balances itself.
Right.
Now, a level 5 thinker doesn't just memorize human anatomy, they extract the concept of the negative feedback loop.
And because they have conceptual fluency, they can instantly apply that exact same pattern to entirely different domains. They look at economics, and they see that when prices get too high, demand drops, which forces prices back down. That's a negative feedback loop.
Yeah. Or they look at human psychology and they realize that relying purely on willpower to break a habit usually creates a negative feedback loop of exhaustion and relapse.
They didn't have to become PhDs in biology, economics, and psychology to see that. They just learned the shape of the concept.
Because patterns transfer. Trivia does not. That is the essence of synthesis.
Okay, so to help us actually achieve this conceptual fluency, the text introduces what I think is the most powerful operational tool in the entire document. It splits the human experience of reality into two completely distinct frameworks. Framework A, which it calls lenses, and Framework B, which it calls arenas.
This completely changes how you evaluate where you spend your mental energy. Framework A, the lenses, represents how you think. These are the foundational engines of cognition. They are the underlying structures of reality.
And Framework B, the arenas, represents what people actually think about. It's the applied, messy, everyday world.
Let's unpack these because you have to understand the difference to know where your blind spots are.
Yeah, let's list them out. So the text groups the foundational lenses of Framework A into core categories. You have reality and truth. This is hard science, probability, entropy, the unbreakable laws of physics.
Then you have mind and cognition. This is metacognition, understanding your own cognitive biases, how memory works, how attention is hijacked.
You also have human behavior and psychology. Why do humans do what they do? What drives motivation and tribalism?
You have communication and language, the actual mechanics of how ideas are framed and transmitted. And crucially, you have systems in society understanding economics, power dynamics, and how invisible incentives shape collective behavior.
And wrapping up Framework A, you have decision-making game theory, opportunity costs, you have the meta skill of synthesis itself, and finally, ethics and meaning. Because without a grounding philosophy of what is actually good, clarity is just cold sociopathic calculation.
So all of those lenses, that is Framework A. It is the machinery behind the curtain.
Now contrast that machinery with the stage itself. Framework B, the arenas. This is where 99% of human attention is focused every single day. The arenas are things like entertainment, finance, relationships, self-improvement, technology, health, and culture.
And we should pause here for a really important neutral reporting note regarding the arena of politics.
Right, because the source document approaches politics purely analytically. It doesn't view it as a team sport or to take a partisan stance at all.
It doesn't. It defines politics simply as an arena of identity, power, values, and group alignment. It argues that a clear thinker observes the political arena through the deeper lenses of Framework A, like systems analysis or human behavior, to understand why groups are moving the way they are rather than just blindly cheering for a team.
And that neutrality is essential because the arenas are constantly shifting. The specific technology we use changes every 5 years. The cultural entertainment shifts every season. Financial markets boom and bust. If you only study the arenas, you are constantly trying to catch falling sand.
And the document outlines the severe real-world trade-offs of living exclusively in one framework or the other. Like, let's say you were obsessed with Framework A. You read philosophy, you study game theory, you understand evolutionary psychology, you become incredibly deep. You see the hidden structures of the world.
But the fatal flaw is that you become detached. The text calls this becoming a philosopher without impact. You can brilliantly analyze why a company is failing, but you lack the practical social skills to actually step into the arena and fix it. You are paralyzed by your own depth.
But the much more common danger is living entirely in Framework B. This is where almost everyone lives. You care about your relationships, your stock portfolio, the latest tech gadget, the current political scandal.
Right, and living in the arenas gives you immense momentum. You are socially aligned because you are talking about what everyone else is talking about, but the fatal flaw here is that you become highly reactive and deeply vulnerable to manipulation.
Because you don't have the deeper lenses. If you only live in the arena of finance and you don't understand the lens of human psychology, you will panic sell your stocks when the market gets emotional.
Or if you only live in the arena of politics and you don't understand the lens of systems and incentives, you will be easily manipulated by outraged media. You become a participant without understanding.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, if you want to grow specific traits? How do you fix this?
Well, the text maps out a formula for actual cognitive growth. If you find yourself highly capable in the real world but easily manipulated or lacking deep understanding, you need to retreat and study Framework A. Read about cognitive biases. Study systems theory.
But if you find yourself overanalyzing everything and achieving nothing, you need to force yourself into Framework B. Start a business. Go on a date. Engage with the messy reality of other people.
But the ultimate superpower, the thing that actually generates level 5 adaptive clarity, is a mechanism the text calls the integrator loop. It is the continuous discipline cycle of moving from A to B to A to B.
Let's walk through exactly how this works in real life, because this is the practical application of everything we've discussed. Let's say you are at your desk and you decide to learn about the concept of incentive structures from the systems lens in Framework A.
Okay.
You read about how people will optimize their behavior for whatever metric they are measured by. Okay, you have the abstract concept.
But it's just theoretical marble until you take it into the arena. So you step into Framework B, specifically the arena of your workplace relationships. You're in a meeting, and two departments are aggressively fighting over a project deadline.
Right.
Instead of just getting emotionally involved in the argument, you apply your new lens. You look at the situation and ask, what are the incentives here? You realize the sales team is incentivized by speed, and the engineering team is incentivized by a lack of bugs. They aren't bad people. Their incentives are just misaligned.
Exactly. You used the lens to see the reality of the arena clearly. But the loop isn't finished. You then have to step back into Framework A to reflect. You update your mental model based on what you just witnessed.
You realize, incentives aren't just financial. They are deeply tied to professional reputation and stress avoidance. You've sharpened the lens.
And then you step back into the arena tomorrow, using that sharper lens to navigate the world even better. Learn, apply, reflect, reapply. It is an evolutionary engine for clarity.
It's brilliant in its mechanics. But we have to address the elephant in the room here, moving constantly between Framework A and B, zooming into the granular reality of a social interaction, then zooming out to analyze the systemic incentives, then jumping back in to act. It sounds utterly exhausting for one single human brain to manage.
Oh, it is. Most people would burn out trying to run that integrator loop manually all day.
Which is exactly where the document introduces its most unique, most radical, and frankly, its most conceptually bizarre solution. To manage this massive cognitive load, to process all these lenses and arenas without having a breakdown, the text proposes building an internal ecosystem.
Yeah. It suggests dividing your mind into a team of subpersonality.
Okay, when I first read this, it sounded so esoteric.
Yeah.
But it actually mirrors highly established psychological models, right?
It does. Think of Jungian archetypes, or more specifically, internal family systems therapy, which treats the human psyche not as a single monolith, but as a collection of different parts, managers, protectors, exile.
But the text isn't proposing this for trauma healing. It is proposing a fully functional strategic framework. It calls it a full-stack cognition system.
Exactly.
But hold on, I need to push back on this, representing the skeptical listener here.
Yeah.
You're telling me the secret to a clear mind is effectively inducing multiple personalities. How does assigning 10 different names to my thoughts not just lead to total mental fragmentation, chaos, and, acting like a crazy person?
It's a vital question. The key is that these aren't fractured identities taking over your consciousness. They are highly specialized cognitive modes that you deliberately construct and delegate tasks to. Think of it like running a corporation inside your head.
Okay, a corporation.
You, the core consciousness, are the CEO. But a CEO shouldn't be trying to write code, do the marketing, and clean the floors simultaneously. You assign roles.
Okay, let's look at the actual org chart the text proposes, because it's fascinatingly specific. It divides these internal modes, these subpersonalities, into three distinct departments: the A core, the B core, and the bridges.
Let's start with the A core. These are your thinkers. They live permanently in Framework A, analyzing the deep lenses. Leading the A core is Tira. She is the synthesizer. Her sole job is pure reflection, abstraction, and pattern recognition.
She doesn't care about social awkwardness or deadlines. She just looks for the deep truth.
Exactly. But if you only have Tira, you'll float away into the clouds. So she is grounded by Devin, the strategic realist. His job is constraint. He looks at Tira's grand theories and points out the risks, the missing variables, and the structural flaws.
And rounding out the thinkers is Tommy, the conceptual builder. Once Tira spots a pattern and Devin stress tests it, Tommy figures out mechanically how to turn it into a usable mental model. Those three handle the heavy cognitive lifting. They are the strategy department.
But strategy is useless without execution. So we move to the B core. These are the doers. They live entirely in Framework B, the arenas of messy human reality. First, you have Mac, the social navigator.
Right, Mac reads the room. Mac understands culture, social energy, and empathy. When you are at a dinner party, you want Mac driving, not Tyra.
Exactly. Then there is Liz, the performer and strategist. She understands power dynamics, influence, and how to actually navigate office politics or negotiations. Val is the pure executor. Val doesn't overthink. Val just writes the email, hits the gym, and gets the work done through brute discipline.
And crucially, there is Addie, the experiencer. Addie is the part of you that doesn't analyze or strategize at all. Addie just experiences the present moment, feeling the sun on your face, enjoying a meal, finding joy and meaning.
So you have the thinkers and the doers. But if the thinkers stay in the ivory tower and the doers just run around reacting to things, the corporation fails. That's why the system absolutely relies on the third group, the bridges.
The translators.
Right. Bannock is the integrator leader. He talks to both sides. He takes the high-level insights from the A Corps and translates them into actionable directives for the B Corps. Kenny is the grounded realist, acting as a rapid response check between theory and reality.
And Kelly is the emotional integrator, ensuring that your cold analytical models remain connected to deep human empathy.
It's an incredible mental architecture.
It really is. It's formalizing that integrator loop. You let the specialists handle their domains. It's like when I'm reading a dense philosophical text, I let the synthesizer mode take over. When I need to resolve a conflict with a friend, I shut down the synthesizer and let the social navigator and the emotional integrator handle it. You don't ask your lead engineer, Tommy, to do the PR.
It's highly efficient, but we must highlight the expert critique the text itself provides about this system. It comes with massive warnings. The biggest risk, as you guessed earlier, is fragmentation through lack of crosstalk.
Next talk.
Yeah, if these modes do not communicate internally, if you don't actively reflect and integrate their different perspectives, the system shatters. You end up being cold and analytical at work and purely emotional at home with no unified sense of self.
The text also points out a fascinating structural imbalance in this specific 10-person lineup. If you look closely, the modes dedicated to analysis, strategy, and execution heavily outnumber the mode dedicated to pure joy and presence, Addie.
Right, there's only one Addie.
But the text argues that Addie is the most vital component because she represents the why of the entire system.
Exactly. Why bother building this massive cognitive machinery to achieve clarity if you never allow yourself to simply experience the beauty of reality? Without the emotional core, the clarity engine just becomes a cold, sociopathic calculator, optimizing for nothing.
So, assuming someone actually does the work, they build the subtractive filters, they learn the conceptual patterns, they run the integrator loop, maybe they even build this internal corporate team. It brings us to a rather harsh societal reality that the final section of the text forces us to confront.
The rarity of it all.
Yeah. Out of the billions of people navigating this blinding white noise, how many actually achieve a clear mind? And more terrifyingly, how do we know if we are one of them?
The text leans heavily into cognitive psychology here, and it is deeply humbling. It explains that true clarity is exceedingly rare because our brains actively trick us into feeling clear when we aren't.
It points to the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Yes, where people with the lowest level of actual understanding possess the highest level of absolute unearned confidence. Because they literally don't know enough to see what they are missing, the picture looks perfectly simple to them.
And there was a specific concept here that I absolutely loved, the illusion of explanatory depth. We feel confident that we understand the world because things feel familiar. But familiarity is not clarity.
Let's use a tangible example for that. Think about a bicycle. If I asked you, do you know how a bicycle works? You would immediately say yes. It's obvious. You pedal, the wheels turn.
But I hand you a piece of paper and a pen right now, and I tell you to draw the specific mechanical linkage of the chain, the gears, and the pedals from memory. Almost everyone fails completely.
They do. You draw the chain connecting to the wrong wheel or the pedals floating in space. Your brain substituted the feeling of familiarity with actual structural clarity.
Now take that illusion and apply it to how people argue passionately on the internet about macroeconomics or healthcare policy or geopolitics.
They feel absolute certainty about complex systems they couldn't even begin to sketch on a napkin. So most people who feel perfectly clear are actually just operating on mental heuristics, tribal talking points, and unexamined confidence.
Which brings us to a brilliant reframe the text offers regarding the intense polarization we see in society. We look at the news, we look at the culture wars, and we think everyone is just confused and crazy.
But the text argues that the deepest friction doesn't occur because no one is clear. It occurs because different groups are perfectly structurally clear within entirely incompatible mental models.
Yes. If my fundamental mental model of the world is perfectly optimized for efficiency and merit, and your foundational mental model is perfectly optimized for fairness and equity, we can both be operating with deep internal clarity.
But when we collide in the arena, we will sound like insane people to each other because our baseline assumptions, the lenses we are using, are fundamentally at war.
And this leads to perhaps the most profound, counterintuitive insight in the entire document. We naturally assume that achieving clarity will make life easier. We think clarity means the clouds part, the path is obvious, and all anxiety vanishes.
Here is where it gets really interesting.
The text states that true clarity actually decreases your sense of certainty. I want to repeat that because it's so important. True clarity decreases certainty.
Why? Because when you actually achieve high-level clarity, you strip away the comforting illusions. You start seeing the massive, interconnected complexity of systems. You realize that there are rarely perfect solutions, only trade-offs.
You see the second and third order consequences of every choice.
And because you can clearly see those trade-offs, making decisions actually feels heavier. Clarity replaces the blissful, lightweight ignorance of blind confidence with the heavy, sobering burden of responsibility. You can no longer pretend you didn't know the risks.
Which explains exactly why so many people unconsciously avoid it. It is infinitely easier and far more socially rewarded to be confident and wrong than it is to be clear, nuanced, and burdened with trade-offs.
So if our brains are tricking us, how do we actually test ourselves? How do you, the listener, diagnose your own clarity right now?
The document provides a ruthless set of diagnostic questions. Test yourself with these. Question 1. Can you explain your position simply without resorting to industry jargon, buzzwords, or rambling tangents?
Simplicity is the ultimate, undeniable proxy for true clarity. If you can't explain it to an intelligent high schooler, you don't actually understand it.
Question 2. Can you argue the opposite side of your own belief fairly without creating a cartoonish straw man? If you cannot articulate the opposing worldview better than your opponent can, your clarity is fundamentally incomplete. You are operating on tribalism, not synthesis. And question 3, the hardest one of all. What specific piece of evidence would force you to change your mind? If your answer is nothing, or if you instantly get defensive at the question, you are not operating with a clear mind. You are operating as a religious zealot for your own ideology.
You also have to guard against the two major illusions of false clarity that the text warns about. First is overconfidence. This is the shallow clarity we talked about. The person who constantly says, well, the answer is obvious, simply because they are blind to 90% of the variables.
Right. And the second illusion is over-abstraction. This is the person who sounds incredibly deep and philosophical, using massive words to describe society, but their ideas are completely disconnected from the messy reality of the arenas. It sounds profound, but it's totally unactionable.
Real clarity, as the text beautifully defines it, is compression without distortion. It is taking the massive complexity of the world and compressing it down to something you can hold in your hand and use, without lying about the nature of the reality you compressed.
So let's step back and look at the whole picture we've painted today. Our mission was to explore this blueprint for a clear mind. And what we discovered is that clarity is not about hoarding more information. Adding more light to that 8K camera sensor just washes out the picture entirely.
Clarity is the ultimate subtractive superpower. It is the exhausting, disciplined process of chiseling away the noise. It's about filtering reality through those foundational framework A lenses, taking those insights into the framework B arenas of your daily life, updating your models, and perhaps even building an entire internal corporate team of specialized modes to manage the sheer weight of the modern world.
And as you embarked on this, remember the social reality the text so bluntly highlights. Our current systems, our algorithms, and our culture will almost always select for and reward loud, immediate confidence over quiet, slow nuance.
Operating as a truly clear thinker might often feel deeply isolating. You will sound less certain than the pundits screaming on television. But developing this systemic approach is the only way to stop reacting to the shadows and build a genuine functional relationship with reality itself.
And that brings us to the final, somewhat provocative thought the text leads us to mull over, which I think is the perfect distillation of everything we've discussed.
Yeah.
The ultimate irony of clarity is that the closer you get to it, the more clearly you realize exactly how much you do not know.
The goal of this entire system, all the lenses, the arenas, the integrator loops, the subpersonalities, is not to reach some mythical mountaintop where you understand everything perfectly. That is a biological impossibility.
The true goal is to become someone who knows exactly how to navigate not fully understanding. It is about building the capacity to walk out into the blinding, chaotic, infinite white light of the modern information age, calmly adjust your aperture, subtract the blinding noise, and finally actually see the picture.